We are here with Alesia Michelle. Alesia is one of the premier American Eurovision content creators out there. She's also the deputy digital director for the SEIU, which, if you don't know, is a union that has about 2 million members. Alesia has a degree in broadcast journalism from Hampton University. And I didn't know this, has performed on stage at the Apollo not once, but twice. So, Alesia, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. I don't know if I feel worthy of that introduction.
I just want to establish for our listeners that I made none of that up. That is all true.
It is true. It is true.
Can you give us a bit of the story of how you got into Eurovision?
It's weird because I think being from the Washington, D.C. area, it's a really international city. I grew up going to school with some folks who were European who knew what it was, but none of the pieces of the puzzle really got put together until a friend of mine and her family, who was Greek, were going to Greece for Eurovision in 2006. I don't know if folks can go back to 2006 when Lordi won. It was like actual national news, or international news, I should say.
So then thinking about moving from Eurovision fan to content creator, what was that inspiration for starting the YouTube channel? And can you talk a little bit about how your background and training in broadcast journalism informed your approach?
I had a boyfriend who was very into YouTube and was like, "Oh my gosh, I watch these videos all the time and they suck." And
I I feel like there was an era where everybody's boyfriend was into YouTube. we're
Or is
dealing
it
with
still happening?
consequences.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was an on-air radio person and I had worked at stations doing video work. And I never really thought about having a YouTube channel or anything. I really wanted to talk to folks about Eurovision and have friends I could just digest it with. I mean, now the market is totally flooded. Like everyone has a reaction channel,
Yeah.
But at the time, there wasn't really someone solo kind of Bethany Moda vlog style. Most of the Eurovision sites were doing their interviews and it was still sort of being used to support the websites as opposed to this being the primary space for kind of community and engagement.
Can you talk about how your content and your channel has evolved over the years?
Oh, I don't know. I think the biggest discovery was, oh my gosh, some of the artists actually watch this. like I remember I was going to Melfest and I was there really not representing myself. I think I was actually there representing my radio station. And Benjamin Ingrosso was like, "I know you." I know who you are. He was like, "You call me Little Benny on your YouTube channel." I'm like, "Oh my gosh, y'all are watching this? What are you watching this for?"
Moving to the contest, how has it sort of evolved since you started your channel?
We have to remark on the quality and the fact that I think Eurovision is now finding itself a little bit more lock in step with the times. I think in the 70s, there were Eurovision songs that were able to chart. And then I think things started getting away in the late 90s and then definitely the 2000s. I mean, come on, everybody, it's now it feels a little bit more in the times. I think Lorien in 2012 shifted the contest back to a place where it's no, you can find really good current music here. I think the other thing that I've seen change in the contest is clearly the globalization of it. The fact that we as Americans now have the opportunity to vote, this whole rest of the world vote. And I'm going to be honest, I'm sorry, Europeans, you're going to hate hearing this, but the door's going to crack open more. There might be the North American vote. There might be the South American, instead of everyone just being grouped in the rest of the world.
And actually, sort of off of that, people have a lot of explanations, right, for why Eurovision has started taking off in the States. You'll see people recently point to the Will Ferrell movie, the rise of TikTok as a medium in a way that people can, find Eurovision songs, growing American openness to foreign language content, the different phases of the language rule. And even some people will say the wars in Ukraine and Gaza have brought more attention to the contest in a way that has shifted the brand.
Well, for me, I think my answer is actually simpler than that. I think just the internet alone cracked open the door for more people to really fall into Eurovision. Like when I first was figuring out what Eurovision was, I went to the library. I like, nowadays, everyone can just go on the internet. If you see something trending, the video's just put in front of you. So, because the internet yielded us into streaming media, AKA that's when Netflix was like, because do I think a Hollywood studio would have given Will Ferrell like a ton of money to go film this like movie? Probably not. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
I think that's interesting. When we spoke with the director of the movie, he said that movie was entirely made for a European audience. It wasn't intended for an American audience at all.
yeah.
And then it became the number one movie in the US. I feel
Right.
like this sort of globalization of Eurovision seems also to kind of definitely be a goal of Eurovision itself. The EBU have also kind of consciously tried to expand the brand. Having a partnership with TikTok, is held up as one of the bigger recent developments. You mentioned the rest of the world vote. Like, how would you rate the job the organization has done broadly on this front?
Womp womp. I think it's about a 5. There's so much more that could be done. But to be fair, I think they've done what they can with the internal team that they had. I've talked about this ad nauseum, particularly following this year's contest. When you're doing like a show that sort of has this niche community, the skill sets and resumes you would want for your internal team are not going to be that of what you'd want from someone who's maybe applying for a job involving the Olympics. When it seems like the EBU has done some reflection to figure out what they need to do internally to staff this. But I do think there's a considerable amount of work that they could be doing to help. If Royal Caribbean's doing this brand partnership, how can we harness their digital audience? How can we harness their email list, their SMS list? Like, they're not really doing that because honestly, it takes a lot. And they really have a relatively small internal team.
And do you feel like that's fixed by going from 1 Martin to 2 Martin?
Womp womp. No. But it's a start. It's a start. Yeah. I'm not one of those people that wants to kind of blow up the EBU. I am like, no, let's give them the constructive feedback that we feel like will actually help them to be successful. Because when you get to meet a lot of these artists where this is their opportunity to be introduced potentially to the world, I want them to have a vehicle like that be good and not feel like a joke. And we know that there have been times where Eurovision has been seen as just that.
You've been critical of Martin Österdal's handling of this year's Eurovision, but rewinding, rewinding, you were covering the contest when he took over for Jon Olav. At that point, were there changes you noticed?
Yeah, I mean, there was something to be said for things becoming slightly more streamlined. There did seem to be a little bit more emphasis on giving some of the executive producers of the show a little bit more power. Obviously, once he took over, I do think he has overseen really the globalization of Eurovision. So I think that is a good legacy that he'll have. And, I had another thing too. I'm trying to give you some credit, Martin. Well,
and yet it's
looking to the corner.
I think even his role somewhat expanded into, I think, holding some countries who had long been accused of doing funny business. I mean, he's actually the first one to really hold them accountable for it. I think there was also this sense of him kind of becoming a little bit of a sheriff in town, whereas Jon Olav, I think, was kind of like, you all kind of sort it out.
As someone who grew up in Norway, going from a Norwegian director to a Swedish one, Jon Olav's kind of like, I don't want to ruffle any feathers. We're just going to hang out back here. And Martin walks in and he's like, immediately, I'm putting my stamp on the competition.
So then actually moving to Eurovision 2024, can you just sort of describe your experience of the contest this year from the ground?
It felt like we couldn't really celebrate. I started my channel to have community. I felt in the spaces that I had, we all got to talk about the songs. Like, we got to focus on really foundationally what Eurovision is how it can unite us with music. And also the fun of who do you think is going to win? But again, it felt muted a little bit. And I've been open about this. Like, I felt discomfort in spaces that I don't think I necessarily should have felt discomfort.
There are a lot of reasons to sort of like lay this at Martin Osterdahl's feet. I guess one response to that would be that really the core of the problem here is the EBU and EBU decision making, that the inconsistency between the Russia decision and perhaps the Israel decision created an environment where the kinds of things that you're talking about just weren't going to be possible. Is this a problem of communication, or is the problem deeper than that, in that the EBU has kind of lost its way in terms of its values?
I do want to contrast the Russia decision because there is a difference here. You had broadcasters sitting at that table saying, we are not going to participate if they are there. That's not what happened this past year.
Just to sort of zero in on that one a little bit, I think a lot of the messaging around the Russia decision was not one of coalition management. It's the whole story of Eurovision, right? It's founded in the aftermath of World War II. We stand for these values and blah, 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 blah. So there was kind of a precedent created, maybe not by the Russia decision, but by some of the justification at the time given for the Russia decision.
Yeah. That part, I think, is a fair critique that the EBU has swallowed. I've gone on record in saying this. The whole Eurovision 2024, the Israel of it all, the Joost Klein of it all, the Netherlands disqualification should be studied in universities across the world for how you don't handle a crisis communications situation. And this is where I would say PR strategy comes into play. The press wanted to know. The interviewers were there. The press opportunities were there. And I'm not talking about fan media. I'm talking about traditional media. And there wasn't no press conference. I think if they had just had a spokesperson actually out there having conversations with press or Martin, just put Martin out there, I think that would have made a world of difference. I do think that there could be a real conversation for expanding the reference group potentially, or at least placing some level of quotas to make sure that it truly feels representative, because we don't have anybody from a Balkan. And what have we been seeing lately at Eurovision? Balkan countries not participating as much. That's not good.
How do you think about reporting on the politics surrounding each Eurovision? How much do you see that as important context, and how much do you feel it's outside the purview of music journalism?
Politics is about people. We all live in countries. To think that Eurovision is going to exist and politics won't creep up in it is delusional. Like, sweetie, let me hold your hand while I tell you this. It wasn't Loreen who won. Sweden won Eurovision. Right. So I think that's the place to start. But I think where the line becomes blurry, like if the EBU and Martin Osterdahl can make up points for, Romania, who was doing funny business, and Azerbaijan and all of those things, I don't understand why they can't find an artist from that country who then can represent their country, who maybe does not agree with what their government is doing. And I'm saying that in the example of Russia or Belarus.
I love that idea. It's kind of like when you don't recognize like a country's government, like a military coup happens, and then like you're only dealing with the opposition leader who actually like lives in Buenos Aires or something like that.
Right. There are examples of this. Like, I think Bambi Thug is like the perfect example. And I think I have at times gotten emotional about it. And Nemo was another example that I'm like, so you mean to tell me I'm not supposed to vote and support this artist that, one, I just think is like super talented. And also they're an independent artist. They don't even have a label. Like, and this is like their opportunity. And I'm supposed to like walk away from that person who also happens to be part of like a marginalized community because you want to burn this thing down? Because we don't have that many avenues. Even with the democratization of social media, it is still so hard to break through in these spaces. And Eurovision can be such a powerful vehicle. I am an optimist. So I could be a little delusionally optimistic, and I might be holding on longer than others. But I think taking away that platform that could be so great feels like, oh, no, I don't want to do that.
I think one of the sort of interesting stories that you've really been a part of is Eurovision's like evolving relationship to independent content creators.
This is an area that I think the EBU should truly be applauded in, because they were allowing fan media unprecedented access. Because I think some of the mainstream media was like, like, we don't care. Like, just tell us who wins and we'll write up the thing and, we'll tune in on Saturday night. I think where they're missing out a little bit is if really we are trying to make a little bit more money, and if we are truly trying to make this thing global, they are going to have someone internal that is doing their like influencer creator outreach. Because what they have done sometimes is they just make it open to like influencers. And so you'll get people that aren't really optimal to your brand. Like, you're not doing that personalization thing. And I do some of this work in my day job where it's like, I want to find like the right creator. I want to bring you aboard. We're going to have conversations about like what it is that we do and what we would like to see you bring, and almost get a little bit prescriptive with it. It takes in-house staffing a little bit. I can have empathy for the fact that it's like, oh, dang, like I think you got a little bit sideswiped, but I can have my professional hat on and look at it and go, you should have been prepared for this, though. So now they have the opportunity of a do-over, and they have an opportunity to get more savvy internal. And I really hope they do. And I'm overall optimistic.
Well, I think that is a perfect place to end it, on a little bit of optimism for 2025. Alesia, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
It's really awesome.
All the mysteries of the Euroverse.